everyone. Welcome to Mental Movements. My name is Gidget Smith, G. Antoinette Smith. I am a marriage and family therapist, and today we're going to get right into about toxic relationship between a narcissist and an empath, right? And so I think it's so important that we talk about toxic relationships. And I find that even you're going to see me look in different ways because I am on multiple platforms. So no one thinks I'm like bugging out. And so when you're dealing with the toxic relationship between a narcissist and an empath, I find that many times I see this in my office or when I'm doing therapy, and a lot of people are not really familiar with this, and sometimes people are not even realizing that they are actually inside of this type of relationship. And I feel that it's important for us to really talk about the toxic relationship between the narcissist and the empath. So let's get right into it, right? So let's talk about the toxic relationship between a narcissist and an empath. Okay, so I think it's first important for me to really discuss with you. I said it last week, but I think for those who may just be coming on now or those who are here for the very first time, that I discuss what is a narcissist, right? Because we hear it in our social medias, we hear it in everyday life. People say, oh, you're a narcissist or what have you. So let's talk about what a narcissist is. So a narcissist is a person who views themselves that they're higher than others with their, whether it's with their attitude, and they believe that they're more special and deserve special attention and things, right? And then, as I spoke about it last week, for those who didn't catch last week, please go on YouTube and really look and review what was stated earlier. And so people have a tendency to call narcissistic people that are actually have a diagnosis such as narcissistic personality disorder, right? And this person has a grandiose thinking, right? They have an inflated self of ego, and they lack empathy, okay? And they want to be admired by all people, as I discussed last week. But deep down, they have very low self-esteem. They crave the attention so that they can build themselves up, okay? And they have deep-rooted insecurities and fears, to be very frank with you. So let me talk about the empath, right? Because a lot of times people they want to know, what is an empath? Right. And so an empath is a person that has a high attuned feelings and emotions around them. Right. An empath feels whatever that's going on, and they have a deep sense of emotional level of feeling and thinking. This person sometimes, as we will go through later, there are three different types of empaths. Okay, and empaths usually feels what's the feelings of others, the emotions of others in different settings, right? And a lot of times with empaths, they have a hard time, unfortunately, dealing with boundaries, right? And so I'm not going to get into boundaries today, but I just definitely want to share that with you, okay? And so let's talk about empaths, right? So empaths, what do they love about others, right? And so empaths, they love others unconditionally, right? While when you're dealing with a narcissist, they always love themselves, okay? And they are subject to conditioning, particular conditions in their relationships until their needs, his or her needs, are fulfilled. And I want to say his or her because a lot of times people tend to think that women are not narcissistic, but I'm sorry to tell you, there are some narcissistic women there too. Okay. And so while the empath sets out a genuine caring, um, an unadulterated affection, if you will, the narcissist mostly is self-interested, right? They're all about themselves. And so it's important. So let's see, how do you know if you're empath, right? I think it's important, since I discussed a narcissist, let's talk about an empath. And so an empath, you have a lot of empathy, right? And so that is one thing about an empath. This comes from a term of empathy, right? And so this person, when you have a lot of empathy, you have the ability to understand the experiences and feelings of others outside of your own perspective, okay? And empaths, they usually take things further, right? They actually have a sense of feeling emotions as if that the situation is their own experience, right? And so when somebody is, happy, or they're in pain, guess what? The empath, they feel the same happiness or they feel the same exact pain as well. Another way to tell if you're an empath is that closeness and intimacy overwhelms you. Okay, yes. And so those who are empaths have a really hard time dealing with closeness and intimacy. It feels like a blanket over them. Okay. And the empath often finds frequent close contact with someone very difficult for them, okay, which makes sometimes romantic relationships, friendships a little bit difficult. And sometimes it's very challenging for empaths when they go through that. They want to connect, they want to develop a relationship, a lasting partnership, or a friendship with someone that leads to different kinds of things. But what ends up happening is that empaths usually, when they get into a relationship or a friendship, they often feel stressed or overwhelmed or worried about losing the relationship when they're with a person, okay? And sometimes with the empath, they actually go through an overload where they're talking, the feeling of nerves all the time, expressing the need to be alone. You'll find that empaths do that a lot. They want to be alone because they don't want to absorb their partners, their friendships, hurts and feelings. And so because that stresses them out. And a lot of times people don't realize the empaths. And hopefully today this will make a little bit more sense for those who may think that they are empaths. Okay. Another thing that with empaths is that you have good intuition. Yes, you do. Empaths, they feel very strong reactions in their gut, right? And so they're pretty keen on when things are a bit off, right? They pick up quickly on people who are dishonest, and they also know when someone has a motive that they're not that they're not really upright with, right? And so they'll say to you like, I don't know if that's a good idea that you should do that. It seems like it's good on paper, but something is not feeling right with me, right? And so this is a really good trait that empaths do have, and they really pick up on subtle cues, to be frank with you, okay? Another thing about empaths is that you take comfort in nature. Yes, empaths, they like to be in nature. They like to be at beaches. They like to see trees. They like to do walks. They like sunsets. They like quietly walking through the beach or the forest or the garden. They're very in tune with that because it makes their level of anxiety and being around people, it brings them comfort. It levels them off, okay? And so that's another thing about empaths. Now, also, how another thing about empaths, they don't do well in crowded places, okay? Empaths, as I stated earlier, they absorb all types of negative and positive atmospheres, energies, all of that around them. So when they're in a crowded place, they become extremely sensitive. Like it's as if all the emotions of everybody that's in the room, they feel it. And so being in a crowded space and feeling every single person's emotions, their thoughts and feelings, it just overwhelms them. It becomes so unbearable that they can't breathe sometimes. And so that's another thing about empaths. Another thing that if you are wondering if you're an empath, you may find it a hard time not caring, right? And so empath doesn't just feel someone, okay? They really feel the person, right? And so if they find it difficult to watch someone struggle, right? And so naturally they're inclined to help. They're there to help the person to ease their distress, even if it means that it takes over their own feelings, okay? And that's what empaths do. Okay. Another thing about empaths is that people tend to tell them their problems, right? A person will go to empath versus other people. Why? Because empaths are known to be sensitive, right? They have empathetic they're empathetic, right? And so they are literally a great listeners, right? And so they're able to tell you and if something's off, because or they just listen and hear what the person has to say, okay? And a lot of times people feel calm with them because they support them a way that most people don't, right? And so it's easier to reach out to empath because they care deeply, right? And it makes it hard for empaths really to tell them when they are overwhelmed. Empaths, like I stated earlier, they have a hard time dealing with boundaries and really saying to someone, okay, I hear you're going through this, but I have to turn you off for a moment, okay? Because they have a unchecked, they don't know how to uncheck kindness, and say to someone, okay, listen, I'm being kind with you, but this is overwhelming for me right now. So you'll find a lot of empaths have that issue as well, okay? Another thing about empaths is that they don't like conflict. Nope, they don't. It's like conflict, even if it's good conflict, it's like a dread for them. Even if it's something for themselves, they dread having conflict. They avoid it. They avoid conflict, okay? And so what ends up happening is that they have a higher sensitivity when it comes to conflicts. And because of that, it's very hard for them to hurt other person's feelings or feel like someone is being hurt, right? Because then they feel like they cut someone more deeply than they actually may feel, right? And so they have a hard time also taking criticism as well too, because when you criticize them, even if it's good criticism, that's what I'm talking about, not bad ones, but when you give them good criticism, they take it really hard. They take it to heart, and it makes them feel like they're insignificant, okay? And arguments and fights for them causes them distress, where they feel different kinds of emotions and reactions, and they don't like to feel all of that. And so when they're addressing people, they walk on eggshells. They're not sure of how it's going to turn out, so sometimes they just altogether avoid it, okay? Empaths also often don't feel like they can fit in, right? And sometimes, despite them feeling, even though that they're highly attuned with person's feelings and so forth, that can become very exhausting for them. And at times it makes them feel isolated, right? And so because they're absorbing other person's feelings, and when they're trying to explain it, people don't understand, and then they just feel like no one really understands me, and so they don't feel like they fit in. Also, with empaths, they have a higher sensitivity to sounds, smells, and sensations. Yes. And so a lot of times people think that empaths only deal with emotions, but the reality is that they also deal with certain scents. They have a higher sense of smelling fragrances. Their ears is really sensitive to loud noise or loud jargons that persons may have. And they prefer listening to low volumes. You'll find them that when persons will be at let's say a gathering, they would rather hear it in a low tone versus in a medium or high level, so that can bring their temperature of their emotions and sensitivity down. Empaths also, they need time to recharge. Yes, because of their heightened sensitivity to other people's pain and so forth, it can become very draining for them, right? And so they'll find themselves, empaths usually find themselves easily fatigued, and so forth. And a lot of times people think that, excuse me, a lot of times people would think that empaths are only introverts. Well, guess what? I'm sorry to bust your bubble, but guess what? Extroverts can be empaths too, right? And so there's not no specific spectrum, if you will, right? And so extroverted empaths, they need to take extra care of themselves, right? Because they have to find a certain type of balance when they're spending time with others and then restoring their emotional reserves, if you will, okay? And that's a couple of things, that a lot of things that will show with empaths as well. So certainly not last but not least, I'm going to say also empaths tend to isolate. Yeah, they tend to isolate because isolation for empaths is like their recovery zone, right? And so sometimes they will completely shut out the world so that they can heal and replenish themselves. And you'll find that they'll do this, but as I tell a lot of my empaths, clients, it's important that they don't prolong the isolation because then it gets into their mental health capacity that can also tip over and not be healthy at all. And then, last and certainly not least, boundaries. Empaths have a hard time setting boundaries. Boundaries in relationships overall is extremely important, and at times empaths don't. They struggle on how to turn it off and have the ability to feel and find out, what's when to stop doing it, when to stop giving so much, right? Because what they do is that they experience other people's emotions, their problems, their issues. They take it as their own and they don't know how to say, okay, this is too much for me. Right. Because I love my mom. Let's just use that, right. But I need to know how to turn off, but they won't. So they have a hard time dealing with boundaries, especially even if it means that it's going to hurt them. Right. And so let me talk about the different types of empaths. I think it's important that I talk about that because not every empath is the same. And if you're an empath, you may fit all three, or you may fit all two, or you may just fit all one. And so the types of empath, I call it the pie, right? And so we have the physical, right? And so the physical empath, they may experience, they're so in tuned with other person's illnesses and symptoms, they're not even their own. So for an example, if somebody is let's say, let me think of something that deals with illnesses that I can think of empath. Okay, let's say if a person is going for a radiation for cancer treatment, right? And they bring an empath with them. This person will physically feel like they are going through it too. They will be drained like the person that's going through the chemotherapy. They will feel to the point where if the person is tired and feeling like overwhelmed, they will feel that too. So they will literally take on the sickness as if it's their own physically. If then you have the intuitive empath, right? And so the intuitive empath believe that they are so sensitive, they'll be able to share with somebody where they are, where they're going, and things to come, right? Or things that may have happened, or things that are about to happen. So those are intuitive empaths. Then you have emotional empaths, right? And so when you're dealing with the emotional empath, when another person is happy or sad, that person becomes happy or sad, right? And just as I stated earlier. So I wanted to share the different types of empaths because it's important that you know that, okay? And so let's get right into why is the relationship between an empath and a narcissist not healthy, right? Because it's important. But it's important for you to understand when persons are in a relationship with a narcissist and they are an empath, as I expressed to you what an empath is, that relationship becomes very one-sided, right? Where one person is the giver and the other person takes, right? And they take as much as you can. And one thing about a narcissist, they will take from an empath and they will leave them dry. Okay. They it's like a parasite relationship. Okay. And so when the empath, they want to help in the relationship. They want to be that person that provides support. They want to love the narcissist because they feel that that person has gone through some type of different things in their life, and them giving them that love and feeling them their dreams, their hopes, and their downs and their happiness and so forth. Whereas the narcissist in this relationship, they thrive off of this type of attention, right? And so them giving the emotion becomes very manipulative, okay? And the tendencies of the narcissist is that within the relationship, they hold control over the empath in the way that they deal with things, right? And so Let's get right into it, okay? And so, one of the things about empaths is that while they're in this relationship, they're given a great amount of compassion, right? And so, the empath is prone to absorb the emotions and energies of others, as I stated. And so, when they meet with a narcissist or what have you, their energy and their senses triggers something in them that ignites that this narcissist needs their comfort, right? And so they end up becoming a narcissistic supply. Yes, folks, narcissistic supply. And you may say to yourself, well, what's a narcissistic supply, right? I've never heard of that. So let me inform you. So a narcissistic person has their own supply. And what that refers to is that they have a supply of constant attention, right? And admiration needed from this empath, right? And so to gain this attention, narcissists will often give like a false self that's likable and attracted to people, right? And however, because they are narcissistic persons are unable to make healthy connections, they tend to target people that are more vulnerable to feed their supply of giving all their attention, the supply of giving, the person will give all of themselves. Because one thing about empathic persons, when they love hard. And so the narcissistic person will take advantage of this and literally they become their supply, feeding them what they want to hear, feeding them the validation and so forth. Okay. And so let's talk about this, this narcissistic toxic relationship. When it comes to the empaths, you have to understand they believe, and sometimes it's really subconscious, they believe that they can heal the narcissist. Yes. And so they believe like they can help them. They can, if they give them all this love and show the narcissist that they're worth, you're not going through what your parents brought you. I can show you how someone can love you, right? But you have to understand, when you're dealing with a narcissist person, they don't ever see that. They don't ever see that someone can love them. They don't ever see the position that an empath has. And so what ends up happening is that the narcissist will take this position and take advantage of the empath, and they'll see their compassion as weakness. Okay. So while the empath feels that they're compassionate and so forth is a strength, their narcissist will target them. That's a weakness. Okay. And so the attraction between a narcissist and an empath is like opposites attract, right? And it's a dangerous opposite that attracts, which I'll get into, right? And so the attraction between the narcissist and the empath is becomes very how can I put it? Very unhealthy, right? And so you have one that seeks the attention and they want the validation from this person, right? And then what ends up happening is that empath, they're not realizing they're actually becoming codependent in this relationship, right? And so the narcissist tends to deflect all their feelings onto others because their underlying pain and insecurity allows them to do that, right? And so they tend to may never have like caregivers or partners, or they've actually went through some form of traumatic event, or they'll share with the empath their shape of their upbringing, that their parents were broken up, they're divorced, or mom and dad kicked me out, I have no place to stay, all that kind of things, that whereas the empath feels empathy. Oh my gosh, you went through this. I don't want to be like what you were raised or what have you. I want to be that person to be with you. But what ends up happening is that and they don't realize that the empath is making these statements to them to draw them in and then bring them into a abusive emotional cycle, right? And so that's what ends up happening. The narcissistic person they have every opportunity to exploit the empath's need for love and their own fulfillment. Okay, and so a narcissist in this relationship does not consider their actions as problems. They consider that you're the problem, right? And so they're unable to really reflect on their behavior, especially when it comes to their feelings. And so when you have this empath who is keen to feelings and seeing these different things going on, it's really hard for them to really see exactly what is going on, right? And so you have the empath that has a pure heart. They can't imagine this narcissist, what they've gone through. They have unresolved wounds from their families or past relationships or friendships. And whereas the empath feels like they can be there to heal them. And so while healing their wounds, that's different from their own wounds, they try their best to really make things healthy in the relationship and try to make the narcissistic person happy. But what ends up happening is that it's never satisfactory. Okay, and so when you have this relationship, they realize, empaths realize slowly in a game over time, like they feel afraid to talk about their needs and their desires, because they're now over giving so much of this person, feeding them, being their supply. And so that if they say to them, well, I really want to do this, or I have a desire to do this, they feel afraid. They feel like they're going to be an attack, right? Going back to what I said earlier, they don't not empaths do not like conflicts. So what ends up happening is that they're very silent. They are like their lips is like closed with a band-aid over it, and it's like covering them. So they're listening and they're taking it in, but they don't end up having a voice. Most times when you have a narcissist and empath in a relationship, their voice becomes very low till it's silent. Yes, folks. Okay. And so one thing about empaths within this relationship, the empaths will literally dance to the tune of the narcissist. So what do I mean by that? So if the narcissist is in a good mood, then they're in a good mood, right? Remember what I said, empaths, when you're in a good mood, they're in a good mood, right? And then if the narcissist is in a bad mood, they're very wary. They don't want to step on their toes, and they become agitated, and they don't even know why they're agitated. But remember, they're empaths, so they feel what's going on, and then they literally work along with what they feel. Okay. And so why is this a toxic relationship, right? You may be saying, but you know I don't understand, Antoinette. Why is this a toxic relationship? Well, I'm gonna break it down to you two again, right? So empaths, they burst out and they let the narcissist know what they're feeling. Let's say if they say to them, I matter too, right? My feelings matter. I understand that you're feeling this way, but I'm also feeling this way. The narcissist will turn that around and start to call them names. They say, you're acting a little bit crazy. Like, is something wrong with you? Nah, you're crazy to think like that. I don't know why you think like that. That's not the way you should be thinking, right? And so they'll call them, or you're being very dramatic. You're over dramatic, right? They'll start to say all these dismissive behaviors and tactics to gain control, gain access and sensitivity, overriding the empath's mind. So then the empath will then say to themselves, well, am I losing it? Am I overreacting? Am I being over dramatic? I don't think that's over dramatic. I'm just really just stating my feelings, right? And then what ends up happening is that the empath, in having this kind of conversation with the narcissist, they become confused. They're like, wait a minute. I know I said that I felt like this, but how did this end up that I'm crazy? And then, like, I just don't understand what just happened, right? And then I said, well, you know what? Maybe I should have just came home earlier. It could be something simple. Let me think of something simple that I've witnessed in a session. Okay, like oh, you should have washed the dishes, right? And it'll be like, well, maybe you should have been washing the dishes. You're being very over dramatic, but we're talking like the dishes haven't been washed for like weeks. And they'd be like, I think you're crazy. I think like you're really like coming at me in a way over a dish. I mean, oh, we can just get past the base. What's wrong with you? And it'll just make that person really, really turn and think to themselves, what is really going on? And what's unfortunate with this situation is that an empath is not able to understand that they're being manipulated, right? And so when it comes to the narcissist and the empath, they don't realize that this relationship is terribly is and I know that's not a word. It's terrible, right? And so then they end up seeing that within this ladder of the relationship, that it becomes a twisted type of circumstance, right, where they're walking out in eggshells. They don't know what to do. They're not sure of their feelings. They don't know if it's right, and now they begin to question themselves. They become doubtful of their own thoughts, even if it's good thoughts. They're not sure. Am I supposed to have this type of thought or what have you? Okay. And so that's what ends up happening in this type of relationship. Another thing is that when an empath tries to communicate with a narcissist in all truthfulness, right? Like, I want to speak to this, I want to talk about this. The narcissist will literally justify their behavior as to why they did this, why they're going through this, why is this happening, and then say, and you're the cause. You're the cause why this is happening. You're the cause of us going through this. You're the cause of us not sustaining a house, right? And they will literally put all the blame on the empath, and they are incapable of having remorse about it, right? So even if the empath is like, but wait a minute, why am I taking blame for this? No, you're the reason. So what ends up happening in this relationship is that they will dump all their stuff on them, blame them. And unfortunately, in the empath case, remember what I said about an empath? They don't know how to deal with conflict. They take on this. So now it becomes very painful for them, right? And then when they wake up and realize, hold up, this this is not healthy. It's too late. And when I mean too late, meaning that they're so entrenched that they then begin to take on this form of what the narcissist has given them, and that even when someone is speaking sound wisdom to them, they take it like now they have to defend themselves because they have dealt with all of that type of defending themselves with a narcissistic person. Okay. And then a narcissistic person will act like nothing happened. Will be like, what's wrong with your friend? What's wrong with your sister? What's wrong with your brother? What's wrong with your mother? What's wrong with your father? Right? Because they believe that they are completely honest and innocent in the situation, right? And so you have to understand that when an empath, especially when empath marries a narcissist, oh my goodness. Listen, they are their supply, okay? And to the point where it becomes where the empath becomes like they are in prison with this narcissistic person, where they can't share their emotions. They're walking on eggshells, they're questioning themselves. And then unfortunately it becomes such an emotional abusive relationship, because a lot of times people think that a narcissistic person only deals with physical, but guess what, folks? They When it becomes to mental, emotional, people outside may be like, well, why don't you just leave them? But they are so broken down to like powder, if you will, that they don't know what to do and how to really put themselves together. Okay. And so I want to say that. So in case you know somebody that may be in a situation. And so that's why a toxic relationship between an empath and a narcissist is not healthy whatsoever. And that's why I don't feel that people who are empaths, should really be with the person who's narcissistic, right? Or narcissist, excuse me. So that's one of the things I want to share. So we're going to break now for a commercial because I need to drink some water, folks. And so let me just break for a commercial. And as soon as I come back, we're going to really get into the strategies, because I want to be able to give you strategies as to why and how to prevent yourself from being in a narcissistic relationship that is potentially abusive. Okay. So speak to you soon. Bye. Okay, so I know that was really quick. So let's get right into the reasons as to how you can prevent yourself from being in this type of relationship. Okay. So the first thing is that I want you to do is to set clear boundaries. Yes, if you're an empath and you're in a narcissistic relationship, it's important for you to set boundaries, because when you set firm boundaries and have understanding, a narcissist will try to push and test the limits, but you have to really stick to your guns and set boundaries from the very start, right? In any relationship, right? And so even though I know that empaths, um they have a hard time really communicating what they feel, it's important for you to really set your boundaries. And so, and also knowing your voice in that too. So if you don't feel right, if you don't like something, it's important to state it and believe it and set your boundaries, right? And also believe the colors of the narcissist from the beginning. A lot of times empaths, like I stated earlier, they empathize so much to the point where they put themselves in the positioning of the person that they're with, and not realizing that by doing so, you're literally putting yourself in jeopardy. Okay. Another thing is to take an out. Number two would be to take an outsider perspective. Yes, right. So don't be fooled into thinking that your efforts will be appreciated from a narcissist. Understand that a narcissist will never appreciate what you think, which goes to the next one. And by taking the outsider perspective, I would say, listen, if you don't feel comfortable speaking with your family and friends, yes, I have no shame in my game. Go see a therapist, okay? So that they can give you a perspective and help you to understand how to understand the situation clearly, and also understand how to set boundaries and what that looks like for you. Okay. And that really will help you to really get things going with that. Okay. Which brings me to my number three. Remember, a narcissist will never reciprocate what you give. Okay. So soothing their ego, their hurt ego, or their hurt emotions, especially at the expense of your own, won't help a narcissist person with their struggles. Let me just state that to you right now. It won't help them with their accountability for their struggles either. Okay. And so they're not going to validate your efforts that you've given them. Okay. And a narcissist, to be honest, will never give you anything in return. They will just take, and take, and take, and take. And then you'll find yourself in that taking cycle. Okay. So remember that they do not reciprocate the type of emotions and empathy that you would give to them. Okay. And last and certainly but not least, don't forget, don't give them no second chances. Yes, you heard me. Do not give second chances to a narcissist. No, 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 no. Okay. Because what ends up happening is that when you give, like, oh, well, you know what? He or she won't do that next time. I'll give them a chance. To a narcissist, that is like appetizer, baby. Yeah. Okay. When you give them a second chance, they will use that up until you are used up. Okay. They thrive on you giving them chances after chance after chance, right? And just like in any abusive relationship, there's a cycle, and then sometimes the cycle can be a honeymoon period. You're like, oh, well, they did this such a nice thing for me. Oh, they love me. They'll give you that attention, and then they're like, bam, I got him or her again, right? And so you need to understand that by giving a second chance to them, you're actually using up who you are. And why do that, right? And so I hope today that everyone understood why a toxic relationship between an empath and a narcissist is not good. And I hope that you will utilize the tools in which we spoke about today, because it's important for you to be in a healthy relationship. And persons that are in this type of toxic relationships, it takes time, and it really does take therapy. I have to be honest with you, so that you can learn about yourself and learn why you got in this situation. Because what ends up happening when you're in this type of relationship, you end up becoming in a trauma bonding relationship. And then that trauma bonding then leaks out to other relationships, where you then find yourself in trauma bonding relationships. This is like one of the number one forms of trauma bonding between a narcissistic person and a narcissist and an empath. And so, and if you're trying to probably saying, well, what is trauma bonding? I suggest to you to go on YouTube and look at my trauma bonding clip, because it's important for you to understand what trauma bonding is, so that you don't get into this type of relationship, or a codependent relationship, in which this relationship actually exemplifies and also signifies. So let me go into some comments. I see that there's a couple of people that left some comments here. So let me look at it and see. So that sounds like one mirrors than the other. Yes, definitely gaslighting. Yes, absolutely. Yes, facts. Sounds like my last relationship. Wow. Uh-oh. Well, I hope that you're not in that relationship anymore, Kim. Right? And so it's important for you to really understand how not to be in this type of relationship and be in a healthy one. Okay. And so today I decided that I'm going to tell you what's going to be on in the month of November. Yes, November. Thank you. Thank you, Brother Black. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. And so, speaking of that, guess what? Brother Black is actually going to be one of my guests for the month of November. As we already know, is Men's Month. Yes, Men's Health Month. And so for the month of November, I'm going to have several male guests, and we're going to talk about all types of stuff. We're going to talk about men and mental health. We're going to talk about men and relationships. We're going to talk about all things dealing with mental health and the man, because we feel that men cry, men go through too. And a lot of times we hear about women, but we don't really hear about men. And it's important that we talk about this. And as you already know, one thing about me being a part of this platform is that I want to break the stigma of mental health within all communities. And so that's why I do this. I do not get paid for this. So of course, I'm doing this to bring knowledge and awareness, so that you too won't fall in the traps of these kinds of relationships, or if you're going through any different things. So I hope to see you on November. The second week of November is when I will air on. And so look forward to the different commercials and the different advertisements of what's going to come up first. And please invite men. Please share the broadcast, share with others, so that they too can learn different things. And if there's a man in your life that you may be in a relationship, or you have a son or a brother or a cousin or a nephew, it's important for you to share this information with them as we talk about Men's Month, and to really drive through with the men's health. Okay, so happy October. It's the last day. Make it great. Take care, guys. Bye.